Once upon a time, there was a king who had many sons. I don't know exactly how many, but the youngest one didn't like staying home. He wanted to explore the world and see what he could do. After a while, the king had to let him go. The youngest son traveled for a few days until he found a giant's house. He decided to work for the giant as a servant. In the morning, the giant told him to clean the stable and said he wouldn't have to work more for the day. He said the young man had a kind master, but he had to do his tasks well. Also, he warned him not to enter any other rooms except the one he slept in, or else he'd lose his life. The young man thought the giant was easygoing and decided to peek into the other rooms. In the first room, he saw a pot boiling without fire underneath. He dipped his hair into it, and it turned coppery. In the next room, he found another pot, and his hair turned silver when he dipped it in. In the third room, his hair turned golden when he dipped it in the boiling pot. Curious, he went into the fourth room where he found a beautiful girl sitting like a princess. "Who are you?" she asked. "I started working here yesterday," replied the young man. "Hope you find a better place soon if you're here to work," she said. "I think I have a nice master," replied the prince. "He hasn't given me hard work today. Cleaning the stable is all I need to do." "But how will you manage that?" she asked. "If you clean it like others do, more dirt will come in than what you throw out. I'll teach you. Turn your pitchfork upside down and use the handle. Everything will fly out easily." "I'll try that," said the prince. He spent the whole day with her, and they decided to marry. So, his first day with the giant didn't feel long. As evening approached, she suggested he clean the stable before the giant returned. He tried the method she taught, but his usual way didn't work. So, he followed her advice, and the stable became clean in no time. After finishing, he went back to the room the giant allowed him to stay in and started humming and singing. When the giant returned, he asked if the stable was clean. "Yes, it's clean and fresh, master," replied the prince. The giant checked and found it true. "You must have talked to my maid. You couldn't have thought of that on your own," said the giant. "What's a maid, master?" asked the prince, pretending ignorance. "You'll find out soon enough," said the giant. The next morning, the giant told the prince to bring back his horse from the mountains. After that, he could rest for the day. "Remember not to enter those rooms from yesterday," warned the giant before leaving with his goats. "You are a kind master indeed," said the prince. "But I'll go talk to the maid again. Maybe she'll prefer to be mine than yours soon." He found her and she asked about his tasks for the day. "I just have to get the horse from the mountains," said the prince. "Not a big deal." "It's not as easy as you think," said the maid. "When you get close, fire will come from its nose. Take the bridle and put it in its mouth. Then it'll be calm." The prince spent the day with her, dreaming of marrying her and escaping from the giant. The maid reminded him to get the horse before the giant returned. So, he went, threw the bridle into the horse's mouth when it breathed fire, and rode it home easily. When the giant returned, he checked the stable and found the horse there. "You must have talked to my maid again," said the giant. "You talked about her yesterday and today," replied the prince. "Why not show her to me?" "You'll see her soon," said the giant. On the third morning, the giant went to the woods with his goats again. "Today, you must go underground and get my taxes," he told the prince. "After that, you can rest. You'll see how easy your work is." And then he left. "Even though you're an easy master, this is hard work," thought the prince. "I'll find the master maid. She might help me." He returned to her and told her about his task. "You need to go to the rocky wall under the mountain ridge," said the master maid. "Take the club there and knock on the wall. Someone will come out in sparks. Tell him you're there for the giant's taxes. When he asks how much, say, 'As much as I can carry.'" The prince spent the day with her until she reminded him to go before the giant returned. He followed her instructions, knocked on the wall, and met a fiery creature. "I'm here for the giant's taxes," said the prince. "How much do you want?" asked the fiery creature. "Just what I can carry," replied the prince. "That's good. Follow me," said the fiery creature. Inside, the prince saw heaps of gold and silver. He took as much as he could carry and left. When the giant returned, the prince was singing in his room. "Did you get the tax?" asked the giant. "Yes, I got it," replied the prince when asked about the tax. "Where did you put it?" asked the giant. "It's on the bench," said the prince. The giant checked and found the bag full of gold and silver. "You talked to my maid," accused the giant. "If you did, I'll hurt you." "Yesterday and today you've been talking about her," said the prince. "I wish I could see her myself." "Wait till tomorrow, I'll take you to her," promised the giant. The next day, the giant told the maid to kill the prince and boil him in a cauldron. Then he fell asleep, snoring loudly. The maid cut the prince's finger and dropped blood on a stool. She put garbage in the cauldron but filled a chest with gold, salt, and a water flask. She took a golden apple and 2 gold chickens too. Then they hurried away, reaching the sea and finding a ship. After a long sleep, the giant asked if the food was ready. "It's just starting," said the blood on the stool. The giant slept again. When he woke, he asked if it was ready, but he didn't notice anything. "Almost there," said the second drop of blood, and the giant thought it was the maid again. He went back to sleep. After many hours, he woke and asked if it was done. "Yes, it's ready," said the third drop of blood. The giant sat up, but couldn't see anyone. "Where's the maid?" he called, getting no answer. "She's probably gone out," thought the giant. He tasted the cauldron, but found only shoe soles and rags. Realizing he'd been tricked, he raced after the prince and maid, but he couldn't cross the sea. "I'll call my river sucker," said the giant. The river sucker drank, lowering the sea level. The maid told the prince to throw salt, creating a mountain. The giant called a hill borer to dig through, but the maid used magic water to refill the sea, saving them. They decided to return to the prince's father. The prince went for horses, promising not to forget the maid. "Don't leave. You might forget me," she worried. "I won't forget you. We've been through so much," assured the prince. He insisted on fetching the horses. The maid agreed, but warned him not to greet anyone or eat anything. "Get the horses and come back quickly," she said. When the prince reached the palace, his brother was getting married. Everyone gathered around him, but he ignored them and went to the stable to prepare the horses. They offered him food and drinks, but he refused and focused on the horses. The bride's sister rolled an apple to him, suggesting he eat it after his journey. He took a bite and forgot about the maid and the coach. "Why do I need a coach and horses?" he wondered. He put the horses back and went into the palace. They decided he would marry the bride's sister. Meanwhile, the master maid waited by the sea, but the prince never came. So she found a hut in the woods near the palace. The old crone who owned it was reluctant at first, but the maid paid her and started to clean the hut. She threw gold into the fire, and it covered the hut inside and out. Terrified, the old crone fled and died accidentally. The next morning, the sheriff passed by and saw the golden hut and the beautiful maid inside. He fell in love and proposed to her. She asked if he had money, and he brought back a bag of gold. They agreed to marry and sat down to talk. But as soon as they sat down, the master maid remembered the fire. "I'll take care of it," said the sheriff, jumping up and going to the chimney. "Let me know when you grab the shovel," said the master maid. "I've got it," said the sheriff. "Then let the shovel hold you and pour hot coals over you all night," said the master maid. So the sheriff had to pour hot coals over himself until dawn. He ran away in the morning, looking terrible, and refused to say where he'd been. The next day, the attorney passed by and saw the shining hut. He went in and fell in love with the maid. He promised to marry her and brought a sack of money. But when the master maid said she forgot to lock the door, he went to do it. "Let me know when you grab the latch," she said. "I've got it," shouted the attorney. "Then let the door hold you until dawn," she said. The attorney danced all night, struggling with the door until morning. He cursed and begged, but the door didn't let him go until dawn. As soon as the door let him go, the attorney ran off, forgetting everything, fearing the door might follow him. He looked terrible, as if he'd been chased by rams all night. On the third day, the bailiff passed by and fell in love with the mastermaid too. He brought a sack of money, even bigger than the attorney's. They agreed to marry, but when they sat together, she said she forgot to bring in the calf. "I'll do it," said the bailiff, going out quickly. "Let me know when you grab the calf's tail," said the mastermaid. "I've got it," shouted the bailiff. "Then let the calf's tail hold you, and you hold the calf's tail, and go around the world until dawn," said the mastermaid. The bailiff struggled with the calf until dawn, forgetting everything else. The next day, there was a wedding at the palace. The brothers had trouble with the coach. The sheriff suggested getting a shovel handle from a maiden in the thicket. They asked her, and she lent it to them. But just as they were about to leave, the coach's bottom fell apart again. They made a new one, but it kept breaking. The attorney suggested borrowing half of a porch door from the maiden in the thicket. They got it and tried to go again, but the horses couldn't move the coach. They added more horses, but it didn't help. The bailiff suggested borrowing the maiden's calf, and surprisingly, she agreed. They hitched the calf to the coach, and it dashed off wildly, up and down, making them dizzy. They barely made it to the church and struggled to get out. On the way back, the coach spun even faster, and most of them couldn't remember how they got back. At the palace, the prince who had served the giant suggested inviting the maiden, who lent them the shovel handle, porch door, and calf. He believed they wouldn't have escaped without her help. The king decided to invite the maiden to the palace for dinner, but she refused, saying if the king couldn't come to her, she wouldn't go to him. So the king went to her himself, and she agreed to accompany him. At the palace, she was seated in a place of honor. During dinner, she placed the cock, the hen, and the golden apple from the giant's house on the table. The cock and hen fought over the apple, reminding the prince of their escape from the mountain. Realizing who she was, the prince was overjoyed. They punished the troll witch who had rolled the apple to him. Then, they finally celebrated the wedding properly, with even the tired sheriff, attorney, and bailiff joining in.